Hi everyone, Stepan here. I'm going to continue covering games from Rabac. Yesterday I showed you rounds 1 and 2, and in round 3, as it usually happens when you get 2 points out of the first 2 rounds, you get paired against a higher rated opponent. And I was playing a guy I know. Bruno is a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine, and he is a much stronger player than me. He is a candidate master in Croatia, and he has a lot of experience and plays well. We never played before, at least in a classical game. I think we played some blitz games. And I was preparing for what he may do. He was preparing for what I was going to do, and he out-prepared me, which is something that doesn't happen often, but when it happens, surprisingly enough, I'm happy, because it highlights holes in my repertoire, which I like to think are few. That's not correct, but whenever somebody finds a hole in my repertoire, I'm okay with that. One more thing, this game was weird because during the game I started feeling kind of sick. And after the game, so this was day 2 of the tournament in the afternoon, because it's a double round on day 2. And I actually didn't know what to do because we were playing in a small village, it's not even a town, in a hotel there. I don't drive, I didn't have a car. So I couldn't go and get a rapid test, a COVID test, to see whether I was positive or not. And obviously I couldn't play the next morning if I was positive, because I didn't want to risk infecting somebody. So I came to the hotel reception and I said to the guy, and I thought there was going to be like all around panic after I asked the question. I said, okay, I haven't been feeling well for the last few hours. Do you have a rapid test perhaps? And he said, yeah, that's fine. I do. I'll bring it in like 5 minutes. And then I came to the test, went to my room. Anyway, I was negative, so I was allowed to play, or I played the next morning, but I was sick for the next like 3 or 4 days, and many people have been during the tournament. So this is a digression, sort of to give you a COVID context of the tournament. I asked the guy, like, what's going to happen if the test is positive? He said, you have to leave the hotel in the morning. And, you know, I paid for the hotel, I want to play the tournament, so that's kind of strange. I'm having a similar situation now, because I'm supposed to travel to a tournament in about a week. And, okay, well, let's get to the game. So Bruno played B3, which I've never seen him play before. At least there are no games of his in the databases. So if he is playing B3, then he prepared against what I was going to do. The funny thing is, the next day, the next morning, he was on the reverse side of this. His opponent played B3, which I think he didn't expect, and he ended up playing the setup I played against him. So that's kind of funny. In any case, I went for my London system setup with black because I wanted to see what he was going to do. If he can surprise me, then fine, surprise me. Bishop b2, knight f6, g3, double fianchetto straight away, bishop b5, bishop g2, e6, d3. At this point, I don't have to play h6 just yet, because there's not enough pressure to play e4, and obviously there's no knight on f3, so there's no knight h4, so I played bishop e7, and here he played knight to d2. And h6 has to be the correct move here. And when I looked at the databases, this has been played 11 times, out of which black has played h6 9 times. What I did is fine, I played c6, because I wanted to see how he was going to commit. And I didn't think that my bishop on g6 would be a liability. Of course, c6 is a useful move, because if e4 comes and I retreat, then c4 is not as dangerous and I don't have to react straight away. The difference being that he still hasn't developed his knight to f3, and this is what he's been preparing for the game. Allowing this bishop to stay open, so more pressure on d5. And another idea which came into play 2 moves later, which was key. A key idea behind leaving this knight on the g1 square. And I have to say, yeah, I'm happy he did it, because I learned a lot. Okay, so I ended up playing c6. Again, h6 would have been more precise, and I'll show you why, and you'll understand in a second. After c6, he played e4, I played bishop g6, and now he played h4 instantly. And I was surprised. If you want, you can have a look at this position for a second if you have any experience with the black side of it. It's not easy to react to this. Normally, I'm used to having my bishop on h7, and okay. So let's say instead of the pawn on h2, there's on h4. There's a knight on f3, pawn on h2, pawn on h6, bishop on h7. That's a position I'm comfortable with. I'm not comfortable with this, and here I made a conceptual mistake of not giving myself enough time to understand an opening I'm unfamiliar with. This is brand new territory for me. Having a bishop on g6 instead of on h7 is a huge difference. And obviously there's a threat. He's going to play h5. So I only have two options. I can either play h6 or I can play h5. Now, the consequences of each move are quite significant. Less so with h6 than with h5, but still h6 is a very committal move nonetheless. h6 allows for h5 ideas later on by white, and gaining space in Caro-Kann fashion, where I never really should be castling kingside. I don't think so. So for example, if h6, let's just say white plays h5 straight away. He doesn't have to. I'll show you what the main idea was. The main idea was to play knight h3. That's why the knight was kept on g1. But for example, something like this happens. I mean, let's say black is insane and black castles. You're not surviving this position. Nobody would survive this position. There's just no way. Look at this. Everything is coming down and the knight is coming in. So those are the types of things that led me to make the decision to play h5. I didn't understand what the main idea behind h4 was. I was sort of in my Caro-Kann world where I thought, okay, h5 is coming. And you know, against the tile Caro-Kann you play h5, in the mainline Caro-Kann you play h5, you don't play h6. So I played h5. And there's a huge difference. After knight h3, obviously the knight has an extra square, but that's not the point. The knight is not coming to g5, the knight is coming to f4, which I did see. But I actually had no idea how to react to it. And once he played knight h3, which I thought was, okay, maybe a possibility, but still h5 should be better than h6, I realized that my position is bad. I didn't know how bad. After the game, Bruno and I analyzed briefly without the board, and he knew the opening, so it doesn't matter. But he said that black should be losing here. And when I analyzed the game myself, I believed him. He didn't find the critical lines. In fact, he made a mistake on the very next move, which he couldn't explain. I couldn't explain it either. But yeah, black should be close to losing here with precise play. So I played knight b to d7. And this was actually a trick. So in many of these London setups, you don't develop your knight to d7 yet, or to d2, when there's a pawn on e4 or on e5, because you want to meet e5 with knight f to d7. But in this case, I have the g4 square, so I would love for him to play e5, because then I go knight g4. And he said that he was looking at the same positions with the pawn on h6, where after e5, obviously knight g4 loses a knight because queen g4. And he just did not think about the difference in the position, and he played e5 here. And when I played knight g4, I could see that he is just surprised and cannot believe what he did. So now strategically black is fine. The game should be equal. Winning this pawn is possible in some variations, but it's definitely not advisable. Instead of e5, simply knight f4, and the engine gives this position as +2 for white. I didn't think it was that bad, but when you analyze some lines, you do see that it's that bad. Black is supposed to take the e4, which I don't think there's a big difference. Whatever black does, white is better. So knight g6, fg6, knight e4, bishop e4. Now the engine gives this line with queen a5, king f1, and castles. In my mind, I was intending to defend the g6 pawn with my king and say, okay, I'm worse, but probably I can defend. The engine says black doesn't defend. In any case, I was worse, should have been beaten in the opening. He made a mistake, so I got away with it. Let me show you what happened next. So e5 was played and knight g4. He played queen e2 here. I played queen c7, putting pressure on the pawn, and after knight f3, this was actually, queen c7 was a trick which he didn't see I did, because I was threatening queen a5. And if he plays knight f3, I play queen a5. And now I thought I was better. I didn't know how much. The engine says it's all equal, but I thought I was better, because he has to play king f1. What other options does he have? I don't know. Well, if he plays c3, that's sort of the move you would like to play. Then you don't play bishop a3, you play d4. And after, well, pawn takes is pinned, if queen to d2, you just lose, because you have a bishop coming in as well. And if you play knight d4, then I play queen e5. And this is a very comfortable position. Weak. My king is safer, my bishops are better. If you play knight to d2, then I go bishop a3, and after you take queen a3, you go knight f3 defending your pawn again, and I just go queen b2, and after you castle, I just win your pawn. And once the e5 pawn drops, black is just rolling forward. So in any case, king f1, the best move. I should also say that queen to d2 is simply not good, because regardless of whether you take with the king or here, eventually I'm going to put enough pressure on this pawn, I think, and be able to win. Also, I may not have to take, I can just do this. Wait, I have to check this with an engine. Now I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, taking is just the best. I was intending to take, thinking that I would be better. I didn't check with the engine whether there was anything better. Okay, in any case, queen a5, king f1, which I thought was the best move, and he said he thought he had to play it as well. I castled queenside. Now we have a game. He played knight f4, I played bishop f5, knight d4. This was all played in like half an hour. We both calculated a lot here, because it's very complicated. But our decisions were all correct. Knight f5, gf5, he played a3 here. I just want to show you f3. If he thinks he could win a pawn, he cannot win a pawn. I just go knight h6, and if he takes here, I actually just go f4. And black should be much, much better here, especially if this is taken, which probably should be taken. I just go knight f5, and you can see that this king is not happy, and black is better. The engine gives that as -1.5, which visually it seems even worse for me. Anyway, a3 played, queen b6, bishop f3. He wants to trade off my strong knight, fine. And in fact, the engine says black is winning here with a move I kept missing until the end of the game. And when we were analyzing the game briefly, straight after we finished, he said, okay, yeah, you had to play this. And I said, I didn't see it. And I didn't see it in 5 different positions, which means that obviously I have a positional hole in my knowledge that for some reason prevented me from finding the idea. The idea is d4. Now, when you put it on the board, it seems absurdly simple. Why is it simple? Well, I'm just going to win the pawn. Whether it's now or in 10 moves, it doesn't matter. I'm going to win the pawn. The only way for you to get rid of this pawn is to play c3 and create a weakness, which is already targeted by my rook. So, for example, bishop takes g4, saving the pawn on e5. H takes. Let's say b4, preventing c5. Bishop g5, the pawn is pinned. So I'm just threatening to take, and my bishop was sort of a useless piece. His knight is a great piece. So, for example, knight g2, c5, c3, king b8, king g1. Have to save my bishop, king h2, just rook c8, and I'm just slowly building up. Eventually his position is going to collapse. The engine says -2.5. It seems even worse. This just seems like a position that's harmless for black. Nothing could ever happen, and white has so many weaknesses that one of them is going to drop, and black is going to win. So d4 seemed like a very simple win. Instead, I went for a trade which I thought was sound. It's actually a good trade, but the position goes from -2.5 to minus 0.5. So the idea is that I either want to take on f2 or I want to play bishop to d4, trading off his strong bishop and my bad bishop. So he has to take and takes. He played king g2. Again, this is the second time I missed d4. Again, it was very close to winning. Same reasons as before. I played bishop d4. He has to take, otherwise I win the pawn on e5. So takes, rook h to e1. And in this position, I found the plan, which I thought was good. And then when I played it, I realized there's a strategic flaw. But it was too late. So I played knight f8. And I thought this was a very clever move. It ended up being very clever and turned out great for me because he made a mistake. If he doesn't make a mistake, I just would have, if he did not make the mistake he made here, I would have just gone back to d7. Let me show you why. So my idea was originally to play knight g6, to trade off the knights, and then I thought my position was better because this is a target. I could go c5, maybe if I plant my queen on c3, I'm going to have more space, etc, etc. I was expecting him to prevent knight g6 with h5, and I was expecting him to play h5. He did play h5, and then I played the idea behind knight f8. The more important idea behind knight f8 is that if he plays h5, I go knight h7, knight g5, knight f3, which is what happened in the game, and black's knight is just crushing the whole board. Now so knight f8 worked great. So what was the problem with knight f8, which I saw as soon as I played it? He plays queen to d2, and if he plays queen d2, I cannot go knight g6. If I go knight g6, he takes, I take, plays queen g5, and I thought white has to be better here. I have to play something like rook g8, then I have to play rook e8. My pawns are going to need defending for the rest of the game. Eventually I'm going to have to trade queens, and maybe the position is equal, but I would rather be white because of the potential of the h pawn. Not saying it's important, but it could be important. So I missed that. Luckily for me, he did play h5. And now I played knight h7, he played b4, I played knight g5, he played queen e3 and offered the draw. And the fact that I felt a bit sick is no excuse. I accepted the draw because I couldn't see how to win cleanly. I was just too weak to understand that this position is... The engines say winning for black. For strong humans, winning for black. Bruno would have beaten me. There's no doubt about it. He actually showed me the winning plan as soon as I agreed to a draw. It was the same plan with d4, which I kept missing. I accepted the draw. I didn't feel well, but I also didn't know how to win. I thought I was better, but I mean, probably he can hold. So what I was thinking here, had I not accepted the draw, of course I would have taken the queen. So takes, he cannot take with the pawn because I play knight f3 and take here or on d4. He has to take with the rook. And now I was going to play king c7. And after... Now I know that d4 is a critical move, so let's assume Bruno would have played d4. He would have. And I was going to play a5. And I don't know what he does. Let's say he plays rook c3. I go rook a8. I was going to break through on the queen side and eventually put pressure on these pawns. And I thought, okay, that seems like a good plan. When you turn on the engine, it says minus 1.2. So it's a big advantage, but it's not necessarily a winning advantage, and of course many things could go wrong. What remains true is that strategically I'm always better because my knight has two tremendous squares. His knight only has one. Okay, and also if his knight moves, then h5 is loose. Now, the way to win this position, which Bruno showed me immediately after we finished, is takes, and d4. And he was absolutely correct. This is just crushing for black. So the rook goes back. And then I go king c7, he goes rook c1, then I just continue with this pawn here. Again, this gives me so much space, and this weakens the e5 pawn. I'll just show you an engine line. Let's just look at it together. So minus 2.5, a5, okay, c3 or ba5. Let's say c3, that makes way more sense. So takes, okay, rook takes, pawn takes, minus 2.8. And now you can see why. I mean, my king is better than his. He has 4 weaknesses, basically 5. I mean, I have none. I just didn't see d4. Had I seen d4 and understood why it's good, I would have thought I was winning as well. But yeah, there's a lesson for you and for me. But I should say that this is an okay result for me because I should have lost out of the opening. It's okay for him because he should have lost the endgame. We both missed out on a 2-point advantage. So this is sort of fair. Anyway, I got tested that evening, tested negative, so I was allowed to play in the morning. Okay, thank you very much for watching. Hope you got something from the game. Stay tuned for more chess. Bye-bye.